What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the channel. Beautiful day out, 70 degrees and sun. I just cannot wait for summer. Since it's a beautiful day out, I need to rectify an alignment issue with the GT350 after I lowered the car. The shop said there was no adjustment back there, and that is not the case. They told me there was no rear camber adjustment, so I'm taking it to a Ford dealership. I'm gonna go over a lot of things in this video and show you guys how you can set up the alignment on your GT350 in order to achieve the best street possible specs or on a road course. Well, it is time, guys. Let's do a cold start on the GT350 and get up to the dealership, get this alignment fixed, because I can't wait to drive it, hit some corners, and see how much better these lowering springs truly handle over the stock springs. But I haven't really been able to do that because the alignment's not right. So I'm gonna try to explain everything that's been going on with the alignment and let you know exactly what's happened and how I fixed it.
The only thing I don't like is that when I start the GT350, it wants to close the flaps automatically, and the only way around that is to open the flaps before starting the car. Even though when it was tuned, it was set up to start with the flaps always open. Man, this thing sounds so good. So good.
So I'm here, guys. They're doing the alignment right now. It's really weird because I was in the dealership and it's empty. There's only one sales manager working, which means there's only one salesperson on the floor, which is really crazy. No customers. It's like crickets in there. This is definitely the weirdest thing I've ever seen, though, as I really haven't been out anywhere in the last month and a half other than to film or drive or stuff like that. It's just really crazy to see that the dealership is so empty. Like one salesman and two service advisors and like 3 or 4 techs in the entire building. And there's no customers here, and they're just coming for curbside pickup. And I know during this time you have to be safe. It's just really weird to see it. I've never really been to a dealership since this whole situation began, so it's quite strange. There is the car right there. Definitely want to get everything proper on the rear camber to 0.7 or maybe even -1, but it has to be less camber than the front. The front's calling for 1.2. That is the 2019 GT350R specs. So that's what I'm going for right now, because of the fact that I need to compensate for the softer springs in the rear and give myself a little bit of a bump and oversteer. And you do that in a rear-wheel drive car by making less negative camber in the rear than you have in the front. And that'll give you a little bit of an oversteer. And since this car is gonna be a little bit understeering due to the fact that the rear springs are softer, I'm gonna compensate for that. Oversteer that I like. It wants to go right in. Look at this. So you guys can see the alignment on the screen. It really is great. It's pretty much spot on perfect. I got the rear camber at 0.9 on the rear left and 0.8 on the rear right, of course, negative camber. And I really wanted to get 0.8 on both sides, but it kind of fluctuates a little bit. Even the smallest amount of wind could make the alignment shift while it's on the rack. Doesn't take a whole lot for it to adjust, so I would say that's pretty spot on. Same with the toe. I really wanted 0.15 on both sides, and it pretty much is. And the total toe is 30, right where it should be, as well as the thrust angle being pretty much perfect. I mean, that was fluctuating between 0 and -0.01 a couple of times, so it's pretty much dead center. The only problem with this alignment, which is a problem for me, but not really a real-world problem, and that is the simple fact that the front camber is -1.1 on the driver left front, and on the passenger front right, it's -1.3. So it's pretty much a damn near perfect alignment. Okay, let's talk alignments on the GT350. Now this kind of will cover all rear-wheel drive cars. It will also cover
Mustangs in general because they're rear-wheel drive. Now, with a car that's rear-wheel drive, like the Mustang GT350, you really want to have more positive camber in the rear than you do in the front. This is going to provide a little more oversteer, but it also depends on your suspension. If you have softer springs in the rear, like I do, then you want to compensate for that with less negative camber. The reason is because when you have softer springs in the rear of a rear-wheel drive car, you're going to have a slight amount of understeer. That can be fixed by running less negative camber in the rear and running negative toe in the front, which is why the Shelby GT350 comes with negative 1.2 camber in the front and negative 0.7 in the rear. That was the GT350R specs for 2019. That is 0.15 positive for each tire in the rear and negative 0.05 per wheel for the front. That is the perfect setting to achieve some oversteer on this car. Now, if I had a lot stiffer of a rear spring, say 980 inch-pounds versus the 565 that I do now, I would most likely be looking to do about 1.2 negative camber in the rear alongside the 1.2 in the front. Now, if you guys are wondering what I meant by inch-pounds, that is how many pounds it requires to lower the suspension an inch. I'm going to be doing a full video explaining suspension and alignments, but to keep it simple for this video, we have three types of springs for your car. You have a true progressive spring, a true linear, and then you have a dual rate. Progressive is where the spring gets progressively stiffer as you compress it. The springs on the front of my GT350, like stock, are linear, and they're 250. A linear rate is definitely better for the track, but then there is two types of progressive springs, a true progressive and a dual rate. A dual rate spring, if done correctly, is going to allow you to drive your car on the street and not jar your neck and back, and it's still going to provide the same amount of traction on a road course. A dual rate spring is what the Ford Performance springs have, and that's the ones I have installed on this car. You can tell the difference between a progressive. I'm going to put a picture on the screen so you guys can see the difference between a progressive and a dual rate. A dual rate is always going to give you a better ride on the street than a linear spring. If it's done right and engineered properly, a dual rate can also produce just as good a results on a road course. And they're very hard to manufacture. I spoke with Steeda and Ford Performance. A dual rate spring is very costly and hard to develop because you need to have a good amount of balance between the two different rates, one for the street and one for the track. The Ford Performance springs I have on the car right now are 565 inch-pounds. Once the spring compresses 2 inches, it will shift over to the dual rate, which is 787 inch-pounds. So it's a very good spring on the street, and once you start to turn, it's going to get stiffer. And the fact that it's not a true continual progressive spring means you're not going to get stiffer until you hit that rate, which is why they call it a dual rate. Now, in order to get the 2.5 inches of compression required to get into the dual rate on the Ford Performance springs, you have to consider the fact that there's already about 1.5 inches to 2 inches of compression on the car just by setting the weight down. Inches of compression on a spring begin as soon as you put the car on the ground, because they measure every inch of compression from its maximum height. And what I mean by that is when the springs are installed and this car is on jack stands, as soon as I lower the car, every inch of compression counts towards the measurement of that spring. When I had this car on jack stands, the tire was sitting right about here. I didn't measure it, I should have, but that's roughly where it sits, which means I have about 2.25 inches of compression when it's fully loaded. That means that this car is going to perform very good on the street and it's going to be soft, but it only has about 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch of compression required before it goes into its dual rate spring, which means as soon as I start to corner, it's going to get stiff, which is good. Ford designed a really good spring here, although at its maximum spring rate, 780 is really not the stiffest spring. I would have liked to have had 950 or 1,000. And the only springs you can get that are that good are the Steeda springs, and they're a true 800, 1200 rear versus 565, 787. So I may end up going with the Steeda spring in the back. The only problem is that Steeda lowers the rear 0.5 inches, which is 1/2 inch, whereas Ford Performance is 0.78 all around. But Ford Performance has made an amazing spring here. It's just not quite as stiff as I wanted in the rear. What is the ideal setup for your GT350 or Mustang? I would say a spring rate of 250 inch-pounds in the front, 980 inch-pounds in the rear, or a dual that's going to run you 5 and change and then 7 or 8 and change is also acceptable, like the Ford Performance springs. You also have to set up your alignment appropriately for which type of use you're going to have your car set up for, which is, say, track or street. On the street, I say negative 1.1 or 1.2 in the front, with negative 1 or less in the rear. I went with 0.8, 0.9. That is going to give you a great starting point for a little bit of oversteer. If you guys want less oversteer and say understeer, then you're going to want to have your car set up to have equal camber front and rear. Negative 1.2 all around will suffice that. I can't imagine anybody wanting to have more negative camber in the rear on a rear-wheel drive car, as that's going to give you a lot of understeer and pretty much defeat the purpose of putting these springs in. One really important aspect I did not want to leave out of this video to make sure you guys knew how to do this properly: when you lower your GT350 or GT350R, or pretty much any Mustang that has MagneRide with height level sensors, you want to make sure to calibrate the sensors after you lower the vehicle and it's settled. What I typically do, and what I recommend to you guys, is once you install the lowering springs on your MagneRide equipped Mustang, is you're going to drive around for maybe 5 to 10 miles, then get an alignment. If you have to drive a little bit further, you're most likely okay, because this is not really a huge drop. It's only 3/4 of an inch, or just over 3/4 of an inch, 20 millimeters or 0.78 inches to be exact. So whenever you actually get your alignment done, you want to go ahead and calibrate the ride height sensors at the same time. The dealership can do this by making sure the weight of the vehicle and the suspension is fully loaded, just like you see now, and then they're going to calibrate the sensors with a scan tool, which only takes about 30 seconds. I highly recommend doing this because the MagneRide doesn't know where zero is anymore because you've lowered the car. So as far as the suspension is concerned, the sensors feel like you have stock springs in and you've just got a bunch of weight in the car. And because of that, it's going to ride a little bit stiffer than it should, and it's just not going to be calibrated correctly. So you definitely want to do that as soon as you lower your car. And that's why I'm recommending you guys to do that. It's very important, so do not leave that step out when you lower your Mustang that is equipped with MagneRide. And that pretty much goes for the GT350, GT350R, the Performance Pack 2 Mustangs, and any of them that have MagneRide suspension installed. It's definitely a step you don't want to skip, and you will thank me later.
Well guys, that's going to do it for this video. I'm hoping you enjoyed it and learned something about alignment. I finally got everything taken care of on my car, but not only that, I am hoping you guys enjoyed this video and were able to learn something about getting your alignment right on your GT350, GT500, or Mustang, or pretty much any rear-wheel drive car that you plan on tracking and driving on the street. Thank you so much for watching this video. I got a lot of stuff coming. I got the Dyna Performance sponsorship that just came in with all the carbon fiber stuff for the dash. Thank you so much guys for watching this video. Don't forget to check out the join button below this video. It supports the channel, exclusive membership perks, emojis, emblems, and all kinds of stuff, early access to videos and more. And don't forget to check out the store right below this video. I got lots of Shelby merchandise as well as Hellcat and Red Eye merchandise. Check them out below the video. Truly supports the channel, keeps the videos coming for you guys. And check out my gaming channel, personal vlog channel right there on the screen. But that's gonna do it guys. Be safe out there, take care, have a wonderful day, and I will see all of you on the next upload. Take care guys.